Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, population dynamics. Think about this for a second. Humankind started out incredibly small. We're talking maybe 125,000 people on the entire planet roughly a million years ago. Fast forward to today, and we're literally in the billions. So how did we get here? And more importantly, what does the math actually tell us about our future survival? Let's find out.
So what exactly is population dynamics? Well, it's basically the study of how and why populations change in size, structure, and distribution over time. Imagine a bustling city, say Bangalore. Every single year, new babies are born, people pass away, and thousands of new workers move into the city looking for jobs. Tracking all of those moving pieces, making sense of that constant ebb and flow, that's population dynamics in a nutshell.
And when you zoom out to look at our global history, you see this explosive growth curve. We go from a relatively flat, stable line around the year 1700 to an absolute rocket ship heading into the 2000s, pushing towards a projected 9 billion people by 2048. Understanding the specific forces driving these massive, unprecedented numbers is absolutely critical if we want to prepare for our shared future.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The math of population, 2. Types of growth, 3. Overpopulation versus underpopulation, 4. The demographic transition model, and 5. Population policies.
Section 1. The math of population.
To really understand the bigger trends shaping our world, we first have to look at the birth rate, which is defined simply as the number of live births per 1,000 people per year. This one metric tells us so much about a society's development. For instance, the birth rate tends to be highly elevated in less developed countries like Nigeria or Ethiopia. But in more developed nations like France, we see much lower rates. Why is that? Well, it usually comes down to better education, advanced healthcare, and greater access to family planning and contraception.
On the flip side, you have the death rate, the number of deaths per 1,000 people per year. The death rate naturally drops in developed countries thanks to incredible advances in medicine, public health, and basic sanitation, like clean drinking water. But if you spot a distinctly high death rate in a region, it's usually a tragic indicator of poor healthcare infrastructure, rampant disease, or even war.
Now, when we put those two metrics together, we get what's called natural increase or natural decrease. It's just simple math, really. If births outnumber deaths in a given year, you get a natural increase. The population goes up. But if deaths are higher than births, the population naturally decreases.
But birth and death aren't the whole story, right? We also have the final piece of the math puzzle, migration. You have immigration, which is people moving into a country, and emigration, which is people leaving. When we want to calculate the true total population growth rate, we absolutely must combine that natural increase we just talked about with net migration, the final balance of people moving in and out. It's really the only way to get the full, accurate picture.
Section 2. Types of growth. So how does all this math actually translate into the real world? Generally, our world falls into three main types of population change. First, rapid growth, driven by high birth rates and lower death rates, which we see in countries like Nigeria. Then, we have slow growth, where both birth and death rates are quite low and balanced, kind of like what we see in the USA and France. And finally, declining growth. This happens when the birth rate drops incredibly low, causing the overall population to actually shrink, which is currently the reality for nations like Japan and Germany.
To truly get a grip on these trends, governments look closely at population structure. This is often visualized as a population pyramid, breaking down the demographic by age and gender. And why does this matter? Well, it's all about forecasting economic needs. Think about it. If your population pyramid has a super wide base, meaning lots of young children, the government needs to quickly plan for more schools and teachers. But if the top is heavy with many elderly people, the focus urgently shifts to hospitals, healthcare, and pension planning.
Section 3. Overpopulation versus underpopulation.
What happens when these varying growth rates hit the extremes? Neither scenario is exactly a walk in the park. Overpopulation severely strains a country's resources. It leads to massive housing shortages, high unemployment because there just aren't enough jobs to go around, and heavy environmental degradation. But underpopulation, that is just as challenging. It stifles the economy with severe labor shortages, underused infrastructure, and the incredibly heavy financial burden of caring for a rapidly aging demographic, all without enough young tax-paying workers to actually support them.
Section 4. Demographic Transition Model.
To make sense of all these varying growth rates and extreme scenarios, demographers rely on something called the Demographic Transition Model, or DTM for short. Think of this as a historical cheat sheet. It brilliantly maps out how birth rates, death rates, and total population size change as a country develops economically over time. You'll also notice how a population pyramid visually shifts its shape, from a wide base to a narrow top as a country progresses through these different stages of development.
Let's walk through how this builds across the 5 stages. In Stage 1, a society experiences high birth and death rates due to poor health and famine, keeping population growth very slow. Then, as medicine and food supply improve in Stage 2, death rates plummet, which sparks a rapid population expansion. By Stages 3 and 4, urbanization, better education, and career-focused lifestyles cause birth rates to fall, which stabilizes the population. Finally, a society reaches Stage 5, where birth rates fall so drastically low that the total population actively begins to decline.
Section 5. Population Policies.
But here's a thought. What happens when governments don't like their current stage on this model? What if they decide to hack the system? Well, they generally have 2 primary levers to pull. When birth rates are dangerously low and they fear the economic slowdown of underpopulation, governments introduce pro-natalist policies to actively encourage families to have more children. On the flip side, when growth is incredibly rapid and threatening to exhaust national resources, they use anti-natalist policies to encourage smaller families and basically pull the brakes on growth.
Let's look at the pro-natalist side first. Countries like Singapore, France, and Hungary offer massive financial and social incentives to couples. We are talking about baby bonuses, income tax exemptions, free childcare, and even priority housing. While France has actually achieved one of Europe's highest birth rates through these methods, these programs are notoriously expensive for governments to run, and they often take many, many years to show any real demographic results.
Conversely, let's examine a strict antinatalist approach, China's well-known one-child policy, which ran from 1979 to 2015. Impartially speaking, on the positive side, it successfully reduced pressure on resources, jobs, and housing by slowing population growth rapidly. But it created severe negative impacts, most notably the dangerous 4-2-1 family problem. Because of this policy, a single child is eventually left with the heavy burden of supporting 2 aging parents and 4 grandparents all by themselves, alongside a rapidly shrinking national workforce.
Which brings us to a final vital question. Does the demographic transition model actually fail to predict our real future? Considering the model is based mostly on Western European history, and it completely ignores unpredictable events like sudden pandemics, major migration shifts, and these aggressive government policies we just discussed, we really are left wondering, is human population forecasting ultimately impossible, or are we simply writing the rules for the next uncharted stage of human history right now? Thanks for exploring this with me, and keep questioning the data.